Imagine a village so mysterious that no one even knows where in the world it actually exists. People from different corners of the world traveling through different roads somehow all end up at this exact same village, a place that hides a terrifying truth. Because when night falls here, monsters come out. These creatures don't just attack, they rip humans apart and feast on their flesh. And the scariest part? There's no way to fight back, and no way to escape this cursed village. What happens to the people trapped here? How do they survive? And more importantly, how do they get out? Well, that's what we're about to find out in today's terrifying story. We begin in this eerie, isolated village as the sun starts to set. The village sheriff, Boyd, quickly grabs a handbell and walks through the streets, ringing it loudly, a signal for everyone to head inside immediately and lock up tight. Back at the village mess hall, the sound of the bell sends everyone rushing out, even those who hadn't finished their dinner. The message is clear: no one can be outside once night falls. Elsewhere, a young woman named Sarah is seen closing up her restaurant. She double-checks the windows and doors, then glances nervously at the clock. Everyone here has been warned. Lock everything before dark. But at the village pub, things aren't so orderly. A man named Frank has had way too much to drink. The bartender tries to get him to leave, but when Frank refuses, he has no choice. He locks up the pub and leaves Frank behind. Meanwhile, at Frank's house, his wife Lauren and daughter Megan are growing more and more anxious. Frank still hasn't come home, but with darkness settling in, they have no option. They lock the doors and pray he's safe. But late that night, Megan sees something chilling. Outside her window stands her grandmother, shivering in the cold, asking to be let in. Out of love and without thinking, Megan opens the window, and in that instant, her grandmother transforms into a monster and attacks her. The next morning, Frank finally stumbles home, hungover and oblivious. But something's wrong. A crowd has gathered outside his house, and when Sheriff Boyd sees him, he storms up and slaps Frank across the face before dragging him inside. There, Frank is forced to witness the brutal truth. His entire family is dead, torn apart, their insides eaten, and it's all because Frank wasn't home to lock the doors. Boyd had warned him so many times, but he never listened. Now it's too late. From here, the scene shifts to a new family: Jim, Tabby, and their kids Ethan and Julie. They're on a road trip, casually driving through a countryside highway. Suddenly, a massive tree blocks their path. Jim and Ethan step out to take a look and notice something strange. A murder of crows has gathered above, cawing loudly. Confused, they try to turn around and head back toward the highway, but somehow, no matter which way they go, they keep ending up at the same strange village. And what's even weirder, all the cars in this town have their tires slashed. Panic starts to set in as they realize something's not right. Something is very wrong here. Jim and his family had no idea what kind of nightmare they had just driven into. Still desperate to find a way back to the highway, Jim keeps driving without asking questions, just hoping that somehow they can retrace their path. Meanwhile, we return to the village where Sheriff Boyd arrives at the colony house, a communal home run by a tough woman named Donna. Boyd isn't exactly welcome there, especially by his own son Ellis, who lives in the colony and wants nothing to do with his father. The tension between them is thick, and it doesn't help that Boyd and Donna constantly clash over how to run things. When Boyd meets Ellis, the young man is busy painting a portrait of his girlfriend Fatima. He barely looks up at his father, and it's clear there's a deep emotional divide between them, one we'll learn more about later. But for now, Boyd is here for a grim reason: to tell his son that Lauren and Megan, Frank's wife and daughter, were murdered the night before. He asks Ellis to attend their funeral. Cut to the village cemetery, where a small group has gathered to mourn. Father Khatri leads the service. He's the spiritual anchor of the village, the one who handles all religious duties and tries to maintain hope amid horror. But just as the funeral proceeds, everyone's attention shifts. A large RV is seen driving into the village. It's Jim's RV. The villagers freeze. No one new has arrived in this place for a long, long time, and they all remember what it was like. The confusion, the fear. Boyd tells everyone not to interact. Let them figure it out, he says. Just like we did. As the others watch from a distance, Boyd walks up to the RV alone and talks to Jim. Jim desperately asks how to get back to the highway. Boyd calmly tells him, just stay on the road. But of course, it doesn't work. Every time Jim tries to drive out, he ends up right back at the same town, stuck in a looping trap like some twisted maze. Frustrated but determined, Jim keeps trying. But then, out of nowhere, another car comes speeding toward them and slams into the road. Jim loses control, and the RV crashes violently into a tree. Everyone inside is injured, some worse than others. Jim and Tabby are bruised. Julie is shaken, but their son, Ethan, he's unconscious. A large metal rod has pierced his leg, and he's not responding. Meanwhile, the driver of the second car, a man named Toby, crawls out bleeding heavily. He runs toward the village to get help and finds Boyd, telling him about the crash. Boyd sends Toby with Kenny to the clinic, while he himself rushes to the crash site. There, he finds another man in Toby's car, a strung-out addict named Jade, still high on whatever he took. Boyd handcuffs him to the car for everyone's safety, then turns to help Jim and his family. Soon, Kenny returns to the crash site, along with Ellis, Father Kotri, and the village nurse, Christy. They manage to pull most of the family out of the RV, but Ethan is still stuck. He's lost a lot of blood and moving him could kill him. With only 40 minutes left before nightfall, Christy has no choice. She begins emergency treatment inside the RV itself. Boyd realizes they don't have time. He orders everyone except Christy, Jim, and Tabby to head back to Colony House with Ellis and Kotri. They need to get to safety before the monsters arrive. Tabby is torn, not wanting to leave her son behind, but Boyd assures her it's the only way. Reluctantly, she goes. Once they're gone, Boyd seals the RV doors and windows with talismans, ancient symbols that supposedly keep the monsters out. It's not a guarantee, but it's the only defense they've got. Back at the clinic, Sarah is caring for Toby, or at least she pretends to. Out of nowhere, she kisses him, then stabs him in the neck with a knife. Cold, brutal, chilling. What kind of love is that? Meanwhile, Ellis, Kenny, and Father Kotri are escorting the others, Julie, Tabby, and the restrained Jade, toward Colony House on foot. But disaster strikes when they run over some road spikes, the same ones Boyd and Kenny had set up earlier to try to stop Jim's RV. Their vehicle's tires are destroyed. With no choice, they switch to a backup ride, an old wagon, and keep moving towards safety. Back at the RV, night falls. The forest grows quiet. Then, movement. Shapes appear just beyond the trees. The monsters are here. Boyd is immediately on edge. Jim, still unaware of what these creatures really are, thinks they're rescuers. He moves to open the RV door. Boyd yells, "Don't!" He grabs Jim and throws him back, slamming the door shut just in time. Then, Boyd tells him the truth. Those figures outside, they're not people. They're monsters. Killers. Predators. They'll smile at you while they rip you apart. Jim's blood runs cold. This is no rescue. This is a hunt. Meanwhile, Ellis and the others reach Colony House, but the night is only beginning, and the real horror is just getting started. As the monsters begin surrounding the Colony House, those inside are forced to make a quick decision. Should they let the newcomers in or leave them to die outside? Kenny tries to hold them off, pulling out his gun and firing several rounds, but the bullets do nothing. The creatures don't even flinch. Seeing this, Tabby and Julie are completely horrified. Just then, Donna opens the gate from inside and quickly pulls them in. She slams the door shut just in time, locking it before the monsters can get inside. Although everyone makes it in safely, Donna wastes no time. She orders Tabby, Julie, and Jade to sit on the floor. These newcomers don't know the rules of this place, and one small mistake could cost everyone their lives. Without hesitation, Donna has them tied to chairs and separated in different rooms. Julie is confused and upset, but Donna isn't taking any chances. In a quiet room, Donna sits with a tied-up Tabby and begins explaining everything. At first, Tabby doesn't believe a word. Monsters? Seriously? So Donna tells her about her sister. She explains how her sister was fearless, so fearless in fact, that once she punched a bear in the mouth and broke its tooth. But years ago, they ended up in this strange town. One night, strange figures appeared in front of their car and refused to move. Her sister grabbed her shotgun and stepped outside to confront them. That's when the nightmare began. The figures weren't people, they were monsters. One of them lunged at her sister, tearing her apart. Donna was forced to watch it all, helplessly hiding inside the car while her sister was tortured the entire night. That happened more than 35 years ago, and since then, Donna has been trapped in this place. Now, with the horrifying truth laid bare, Tabby has no choice but to believe her. Elsewhere in the house, Kenny talks to Father Kotri about his father, Mr. Liu. We learn that Mr. Liu suffers from dementia, and that's how Kenny's family ended up trapped in this place. Back in their home city, life was good. But one day, Mr. Liu wandered off because of his condition. When Kenny and his mother tracked him to a nearby town and brought him back, they passed the tree and the crows, and they were never able to leave again. Now, Mr. Liu stays at the town's small hospital, where Christy and Gina care for him. But Kenny still lives in fear, because any night, Mr. Liu might forget to lock his door. And if that happens, the monsters will get in. Father Kotri gently reassures him, "You're doing everything you can." Down in the kitchen, Julie, still tied to a chair, is startled when a strange man enters. His name is Victor. He always carries a little lunchbox, and his mind isn't quite right. Julie immediately feels uneasy, afraid of what Victor might do to her. Luckily, Fatima arrives and calmly tells Victor to leave. She then unties Julie and gently explains everything about the monsters and this terrifying village. Julie is stunned, completely shaken by what she hears. Meanwhile, in the RV, Boyd is teaching Jim about the talismans, mysterious objects that keep the monsters out. As long as a talisman hangs at the door or window, the monsters can't enter. Outside, the creatures crawl over the roof, snarling and scratching. Inside, Christy panics, but Boyd helps calm her down. She focuses on saving Ethan. Steadying herself, she removes the metal rod from Ethan's leg and stitches the wound closed. All the while, she explains that she was once a third-year medical student, until she too got trapped here. Jim tells her that he was once an engineer. He had everything, but now, even he feels helpless. Back at the hospital, we return to Sarah. She's talking to herself, whispering strange things. Then, like a complete psychopath, she begins mutilating Toby's body, slicing into his corpse as if performing some ritual. When she's done, she quietly opens the hospital door and walks away into the night. The open door allows the monsters inside. They tear Gina and Mr. Lou apart. Morning comes. Kenny, unaware of what's happened, goes to reunite Jim with his family. It's a touching moment. Jim and his wife embrace. Julie hugs Ethan. There's relief and tears. Kenny sees Christy and Boyd alive and thanks God for their safety. But when they return to the hospital, Kenny finds his father's mutilated body. He drops to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably as he holds Mr. Lou in his arms. Elsewhere, Sarah confesses to her brother Nathan. She tells him that she's been hearing voices. Those voices told her that if she killed Toby and left the hospital door open, they would let everyone go free. Sarah weeps as she says it, haunted, broken, terrified. Nathan, shaken but calm, holds her and tries to soothe her. Meanwhile, Jim and his family are staying at the colony house for now. Julie sits with Ethan as he rests. As they talk, Ethan suddenly sees something outside the window, a small boy, dressed in white. The boy looks just like Ethan, but no one else sees him. Ethan doesn't tell anyone. That night, Tabby wakes up from a nightmare. She dreamed that the monsters had attacked again. Jim is by her side and comforts her. In another room, Jade finally regains consciousness, but he's still tied to a bed, and he has no idea what kind of nightmare he's just woken up into. Jade had been tied to a bed ever since he woke up, and now he began shouting in frustration. His screams echoed through the colony house until Donna walked in and calmly tried to explain the truth to him. The truth about the village, the rules, and the monsters that roamed at night. But Jade didn't believe a single word. In his mind, this was all some elaborate prank, something his friend Toby had pulled as a joke. He was convinced he had been brought to some kind of creepy circus-themed escape room, and now he just had to solve some clues to get out. Ignoring Donna and Ellis's warnings, Jade managed to break free. He stole a bicycle from a young girl and pedaled away into the village in search of clues. Meanwhile, Boyd visited Frank, who had been locked inside a makeshift jail cell. Frank, still reeling from the brutal death of his wife and daughter, was sunk in despair. But Boyd wasn't just checking in, he was here to prepare Frank for what came next. You see, long ago, Boyd had set up a box in the center of the village. It was designed as punishment for those who broke the rules. The rule was simple. If your actions led to another villager's death, you would be locked inside that box overnight, with no talisman for protection, and the monsters would come. Frank was the first villager ever to be sentenced to the box. Boyd felt torn. He had built that box as a deterrent, not to actually sacrifice someone. So he turned to Father Khatri for advice, hoping the village priest might help persuade the others to go easy on Frank. But Father Khatri reminded Boyd of something vital. The only reason most of the villagers were still alive was because of Boyd's rules. He had brought order to chaos. He had found the first talisman. Without it, people used to bury themselves in dirt pits at night just to survive. If Boyd refused to enforce the punishment now, people would lose trust in the system and start acting on their own. Reluctantly, Boyd returned to Frank. Meanwhile, Father Khatri paid a visit to Jim and his family, now resting at the colony house. He informed them about an important tradition, the choosing ceremony. Each new arrival had to decide, would they live in the communal colony house, sharing everything with others, or would they settle in one of the private homes and live more independently? To help them decide, Khatri showed them around the village. He took them to Frank's old house, now vacant. But when they stepped upstairs, they saw the bloodstains from Lauren and Megan's deaths still fresh on the walls. Tabby was horrified. Now she understood just how vicious the monsters were, how savagely they killed. She wanted nothing more than to leave this cursed place. But Jim knew there was no way out, so he calmly convinced her to stay, and they agreed they would build a life here, somehow. Elsewhere, Victor was exploring the trees behind the colony house. He was trying to see if the trees were moving. As strange as Victor was, there always seemed to be some strange logic to what he said. Ethan wandered up and tried talking to him. At first, Victor refused to engage. He told Ethan to go away, but when Ethan brought up the white boy he'd seen, the same ghostly boy in white clothes, Victor suddenly grew serious. That boy, Victor said, was once my friend too. Victor believed that the white boy had now chosen Ethan, and he asked Ethan to do one thing. Next time you see him, Tell him Victor says hi." Ethan nodded in agreement. But just then Julie arrived, furious to see Ethan talking to Victor. She scolded him and dragged him away, warning him to never speak to Victor again. Meanwhile, Jade caused more trouble in the village diner. After creating a scene and eating, he stumbled into an old underground storage room, almost like a bunker. Inside, he discovered a corpse that suddenly shrieked at him, as if he had caught it showering or intruded at the worst moment. Jade panicked, fell over, and looked up to see strange symbols on the ceiling. But the next second, everything vanished. The body, the symbols, gone. The room looked perfectly normal. Jade, convinced more than ever that this was some sort of staged escape room, grinned to himself and pedaled off toward the choosing ceremony, excited to play along. Back at the ceremony, the entire village had gathered. Jim and his family stood at the center, ready to announce whether they would live in the colony house or one of the private homes. Just as Boyd was about to speak, hoping to explain why Frank didn't deserve to be punished, Frank arrived. Beaten down and grief-stricken, he addressed everyone. He didn't want mercy. He simply wanted to be with his family again. The pain of losing them had broken him, and now he was ready to face the box. His words left the entire village shaken, but not Jade. To him, it still felt like a performance, just another part of the act. Jade suddenly started laughing hysterically during the choosing ceremony, thinking all of this was still a prank. Boyd, already agitated, lost his temper and punched him in front of everyone. He then demanded that Jade be the first to choose. Would he stay in the village or live at the colony house? Still convinced this was all just some elaborate performance, Jade picked the village, mostly to avoid another beating. Wanting to get him away from the crowd, Kenny quickly stepped in and offered to show Jade something. As they walked off, the focus shifted to Jim and his family. Boyd asked where they wanted to live. They had two options: live privately in one of the houses in the village, or stay in the communal colony house with Donna and the others. Jim, Tabitha, and Ethan chose the village, but Julie surprised everyone by choosing the colony house. Tabitha immediately lost her cool. She couldn't believe Julie would choose to separate from them, especially in a place like this. In front of everyone, she scolded her. Boyd stepped in to calm her down and assured Tabitha that his son Ellis, who lived at the colony house, would look after Julie. That seemed to comfort her, and Jim led her away to cool down. As night began to fall, everyone returned to their homes. Boyd, heavy with guilt, locked Frank in the box and walked back to his office, struggling with what he'd just done. Meanwhile, Kenny had brought Jade to Toby's body. The gruesome sight finally convinced Jade that everything he'd heard was true. In shock, he agreed to stay with Kenny at his home, needing time to process it all. As darkness settled over the village, the monsters returned. Frank, sitting alone in the box, began to recall memories of his family, but soon, his painful nostalgia was replaced by fear as shadows moved around him. The creatures approached, and what followed was brutal. His screams echoed into the night, loud enough for Boyd to hear from his office. Boyd sat frozen, listening, but there was nothing he could do. The story then flashed back to the past. We saw a young Victor, just a child, emerging from a storage room at dawn. What he witnessed was horrific. Dead bodies strewn across the village, ripped apart by monsters. He was the only one left. Back in the present, Victor was sketching a sleeping Julie. When she woke up and saw him, she panicked. But Victor, childlike and sincere, handed her the drawing, something he did to help remember things. That's when a girl named Tootie walked in, wearing Julie's clothes, which she had taken from her bag. Since everything was shared at the colony house, Julie couldn't say much, even though she was clearly annoyed. Boyd, carrying the weight of the night, quietly walked to the box the next morning. He retrieved Frank's body and brought it to Father Kotri so he could be buried alongside his family. Victor, meanwhile, arrived at the diner where Ethan was quietly eating breakfast. Jim had taken him there and was momentarily in the restroom. Seizing the opportunity, Victor approached Ethan and began talking about how the trees moved 4 inches. Just then, Jim returned. Seeing Victor, whom he already distrusted near his son, Jim snapped. He grabbed Victor by the collar and threw him out, warning him never to come near Ethan again. Later, Jade convinced Kenny to accompany him back to the storage room where he had seen the symbols and the dead body. But when they arrived, everything was gone, clean, normal. Kenny explained that many people who arrived in the village started seeing strange hallucinations when they first learned the truth. But Jade was convinced what he saw was real. Kenny, still patient, took him to the sheriff's office. Elsewhere, Tabitha was sorting through her things when she found one of Julie's sweaters. Missing her daughter, she walked over to the colony house to give it back. Julie was talking to Fatima when Tabitha arrived. Trying to reconnect, Tabitha urged Julie to return and stay with the family, but Julie finally broke her silence. She didn't want to go back, not because of the village, but because she felt like her family was already falling apart. She revealed what she had overheard before the trip. Jim and Tabitha were planning to divorce. Their youngest child, Thomas, had died due to an accident caused by them, and Tabitha had been shattered ever since. The road trip was supposed to be their way of breaking the news to Julie and Ethan gently. But Julie had heard everything. That betrayal had stayed with her. As Tabitha broke down crying, Julie lashed out and stormed off. Fatima comforted Tabitha and took the sweater, promising to give it to Julie later. Meanwhile, Kenny brought Jade to the sheriff's office and explained one of the village's deepest mysteries. He said that every person currently in the village had found it the same way. No matter which road they had traveled or where in the world they had come from, they all saw the same thing: a fallen tree in the middle of the road. Then came the crows. And then, when they turned around, they weren't where they'd started. They were here. Hearing this, Jade's face changed. He realized this wasn't a dream. It wasn't a prank. It was real. Jade's mind began racing again. If everyone had arrived in the village from different corners of the world through different roads, then maybe there was no way out. But what if they had all entered from the same path? Maybe then an exit could exist. The mystery deepened. Just then, the radio in the sheriff's office began to flicker, turning on and off on its own. Watching this, an idea sparked in Jade's head. Without wasting time, he grabbed the radio and rushed out. Back at home, Tabitha confessed to Jim that Julie had overheard their conversation about the divorce. This reignited their unresolved tension, and another argument broke out between them. Meanwhile, outside their house, Victor approached Ethan at the back gate. Without telling anyone, he convinced Ethan to come with him into the forest. He said he was searching for something important, and Ethan agreed to follow. As the two ventured deeper into the woods, they began tracking the mysterious white boy that only they could see. Eventually, the trail led them to a peculiar tree. Victor called it the faraway tree. According to him, anyone who entered the tree could be teleported to another place. Maybe it would drop them near a stream, or maybe off the side of a cliff. It sounded fascinating and dangerous. Suddenly, Victor heard barking dogs in the distance. The sounds triggered a haunting vision from his past, of when he had seen dead bodies across the village and, for the first time, witnessed the dogs and the white boy. Meanwhile, Jim and Tabitha had realized that Ethan was missing. Following the distant barking, they hurried into the forest and reached the clearing just in time to see Victor and Ethan. Victor, sensing danger, pulled out a gun and fired into the air to scare off the dogs. As Jim approached in a fury, Victor held him at gunpoint, apologizing before quickly leaving the scene. Jim and Tabitha then took Ethan and returned home. Later that evening, Boyd invited Jim, Tabitha, and Ethan to the diner for dinner. As they ate, Sarah sat nearby, closely observing them, especially Ethan. She even spoke to him kindly. But then, something horrifying happened. Words suddenly appeared on Sarah's hand. "Kill the boy." The message shook her to the core. She began trembling, panic flashing across her face, and soon she was overwhelmed by painful visions. Meanwhile, over at Colony House, Victor was digging multiple graves in the yard. His behavior disturbed everyone. When Donna confronted him, he simply replied that he was helping. Sarah was admitted to the clinic for a day, and Christy volunteered to look after her. But her brother Nathan, knowing about her strange behavior and the voices she claimed to hear, came to visit. However, Sarah didn't want to see him, so Boyd made up an excuse and gently sent Nathan away. Back at Jim's home, he had a sudden idea. What if they wrote all their questions about the village and its mysteries on the wall? That way, together, they could try to solve them one by one. That night, while talking to Christy, Sarah learned something deeply personal. Christy revealed that she was married to a woman named Marielle, and they had been very happy together before Christy got trapped in the village. The revelation left Sarah stunned. To her, the only person who ever truly mattered was Nathan, her brother, who had protected her all her life. The next morning, Nathan, increasingly worried about Sarah's erratic behavior, went to Father Khatri for guidance. He believed that as the village priest, Khatri would keep everything confidential. The father agreed, but once he heard the full details about Sarah's visions and violent urges, he realized she could be a serious threat to everyone. Khatri immediately rushed off to find her. Meanwhile, Boyd sat quietly at the grave of his wife Abby, someone who had died tragically in the village. We learned from his monologue that Boyd was tormented by Frank's death, and he felt personally responsible. He wanted to find a way out of the village. He was even considering entering the forest, though he wasn't sure he'd survive. Still, with the weight of leadership on his shoulders, he came to Abby's grave hoping for a sign, some clue about what he should do next. Elsewhere, Sarah, now back from the clinic, went to visit Ethan. Her mind was spiraling. She had decided to kill him. She lured Ethan toward the farm under the pretense of showing him animals. But Tabitha joined them, which disrupted Sarah's plan. Once they reached the barn, Sarah made up another excuse. She said she had something to show Tabitha inside. Trusting her, Tabitha followed. Once inside, Sarah suddenly shoved her into a closet and locked the door. Determined to carry out her mission, she turned toward Ethan, knife in hand, and began walking toward him. At the last moment, Nathan arrived. He tried to stop her, but in the struggle, Sarah accidentally slashed Nathan's throat. He collapsed to the ground and died in front of her. Khatri arrived shortly after, horrified. Soon, A crowd gathered near the farm. Jim freed Tabitha and rushed outside. When Boyd arrived, Khatri informed him that Sarah had fled into the forest, and with night approaching, the monsters would surely kill her. The villagers were shaken. Boyd himself was stunned. Jim, furious, blamed the village for everything and stormed off with his family. Later that night, back at home, Tabitha raised a chilling question. What if they hadn't survived the crash? What if everything happening now was some form of afterlife? And the way things had been unfolding since their accident, everything just might point in that direction. Strange things continued to unfold all around the village. At the diner, Boyd sat beside Christy, gently trying to reassure her that Sarah's actions were not her fault. As they spoke, Boyd suddenly heard a familiar song playing faintly on the radio. It felt like a sign, perhaps from Abby, a message urging him to go into the forest alone. Meanwhile, Nathan had already been buried in the village graveyard. Across town, Jade had a sudden idea regarding the radio. Acting fast, he began removing car batteries from every vehicle in the village. Elsewhere, Tabitha, still haunted by her doubts, paid a visit to Father Khatri to express her fear that maybe they were all dead. But Khatri dismissed the thought, urging her not to dwell on such things, and sent her on her way. When he returned to the church basement, we saw something shocking. Sarah was tied up down there. Khatri had been hiding her. He wanted to learn more about the strange voices she kept hearing. No one else experienced them. It seemed she was somehow connected to this place in ways no one could explain. Maybe, just maybe, the village's escape route could only be found through her. At the same time, Boyd confided in Kenny about his plan to venture into the forest alone. Kenny was furious. He stormed off in silence, deeply hurt. Confused by Kenny's reaction, Boyd sought out Christy for answers. And through her words, Boyd finally understood. Ever since Mr. Liu's death, Kenny had started seeing Boyd as a father figure. He wasn't ready to lose him, too. Feeling the weight of that responsibility, Boyd visited Kenny again and invited him to play a casual game of catch, just like a father and son would. As they talked, Boyd admitted he was aging. One day, he might no longer be strong enough to protect everyone. That's why he needed to go into the forest, to find a way out before it was too late. After hearing this, Kenny finally accepted Boyd's decision. Back at home, Jim was inspecting his appliances when he noticed something bizarre. None of the wires in their house had actual conductors inside, yet everything was still functioning perfectly. Even the power plugs were fake. Just then, Jade showed up. He needed Jim's help building the radio. Jim agreed. Together, they climbed a tall tree hoping to mount an antenna at the top. But as Jim climbed higher, Jade's voice suddenly cut out. Looking up, Jade froze in horror. Hanging from the tree branches above were several corpses, their blood dripping straight down onto him. Among them, Jade saw the same symbol that had haunted him before. Terrified, Jade fled the area and rushed back to the diner to dig deeper into the meaning of that symbol. Meanwhile, Tabitha had found a bracelet while cleaning, one she had once made for Jim. He'd lost it during Julie's birth. She was stunned. It was supposed to be gone forever. At the diner, when Mrs. Liu saw the symbol Jade had been investigating, she immediately took him to a hidden storage room where the belongings of the dead were kept. There, she handed him a journal from 1972 with the exact same symbol drawn inside. Jade was shaken. Everything was starting to connect. Tabitha, now convinced something was deeply wrong, decided to find out where the wires in their house were leading. She began digging into the basement floor, and Jade, still overwhelmed by everything he'd seen, joined her to help. Outside Colony House, Julie spotted a bouquet of flowers left near the door, left daily by a quiet boy named Kevin. Not knowing who placed them, she brought the flowers inside and arranged them in a vase. That night, as everyone slept, Kevin crept into the second-floor bathroom and began talking to a monster waiting outside the window. The monster held a bouquet, identical to the ones Kevin left every day. This confirmed the worst. Kevin was secretly communicating with one of them. The monster wanted to come in, but Kevin refused. The next morning, everyone in Colony House was busy preparing decorations. It had been exactly 1 year since Fatima arrived, and despite the horrors of the village, she had kept everyone hopeful. To celebrate, the community decided to throw a 1-year anniversary party for her. At the church, Father Khatri was still trying to understand the voices Sarah claimed to hear. During one of their talks, Sarah revealed that the voices had warned her ahead of time about the arrival of 2 vehicles, Toby's and Jim's. They had also threatened her. If she didn't kill someone, Ethan would die first. And then, one by one, the entire village. Though Khatri was skeptical, he grew concerned when Sarah asked for paper and drew an image of a spaceship. She told him the voices had seen him hide a bag the day he arrived in the village. Khatri was stunned. Later, he went alone to the graveyard and unearthed a buried bag. Inside it were a liquor bottle, a blood-soaked shirt, and a chocolate bar wrapped in foil that had the exact same spaceship drawing Sarah had sketched. Now convinced that Sarah's voices were real, Khatri approached Boyd, who was preparing to leave for the forest. As they talked, Khatri confessed something he had never told anyone. Back in the real world, he had once given a chocolate bar to a troubled young boy who didn't want to go home. Later that night, worried for the boy's safety, Khatri visited his house, only to find that the boy's father had brutally murdered him. In a fit of rage, Khatri beat the father to death. The boy's blood had soaked into his shirt, the same shirt now buried in the graveyard. And afterward, Khatri had somehow ended up in the village. He had kept that liquor, that bloodied shirt, and that chocolate bar ever since. Kevin stood in the upstairs bathroom of Colony House, preparing to talk to his so-called lover, one of the monsters. But tonight, she had something else in mind. She had come to end things. She was tired of Kevin always keeping her outside, never letting her into Colony House. But Kevin, blinded by emotion, failed to see the truth. As soon as he opened the bathroom door, the monster slipped inside, killed Kevin, and invited the others in. The monsters had breached the walls. Downstairs, the party continued in full swing. Dancing, laughter, celebration. No one knew what horror was unfolding above. Meanwhile, Jade sat alone, flipping through the old diary he had found. Inside it, he came across an old photograph. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, but in the background, he spotted Victor, much younger, caught on camera unintentionally. The moment he saw it, Jade's suspicions ignited. If Victor was in this photo from decades ago, maybe he knew something about the symbols, the answers Jade was desperate to find. He decided to talk to Victor the next morning. Back at Colony House, chaos erupted. The monsters slaughtered several people, Tootie among them. Julie, trying to survive, ran into Victor's room. Victor had sensed this might happen. Calmly, he tied a rope out the window and lowered Julie to safety. Then he followed after her. Meanwhile, Fatima and Donna were quickly helping the remaining survivors escape. A van kept hidden for emergencies was their only hope. Ellis nearly got caught by a monster, but he leapt from a window, injuring his arm. Fatima helped him limp toward the van. As the monsters closed in, Donna started the van and drove it away just in time. Meanwhile, Julie begged Victor to take her out of the village, but Victor pointed toward the woods. He had seen the white boy again, who led them to a faraway tree. Julie stepped inside, disappearing into a new location. Victor followed, but where he ended up, we aren't shown. At the sheriff's station, Boyd and Father Khatri were deep in conversation when Donna's van came screeching to a halt outside. Screams erupted as survivors spilled out. Boyd and Khatri rushed to help, but as Khatri tried to enter, a monster slashed his neck. Though Boyd dragged him inside, it was too late. Father Khatri bled out in his arms. The entire station fell silent in grief and fear. The next day, Boyd broke the news to Sarah. She too was shaken, but Boyd still didn't trust her. Instead, he tied her up and led her deep into the forest. She might be the only key to finding a way out, but he wasn't taking chances. He left her inside a small cabin and returned to the village to speak with Ellis. And now, the story takes us back to the beginning, Boyd's own past. After 30 years of military service, Boyd retired. His wife, Abby, also a Marine, had retired too. Together, they set off on a road trip with their son, Ellis. But along the way, just like everyone else, they encountered the fallen tree and the crows. They turned around, but it was too late. They had entered the village. The streets were silent when they arrived. Suddenly, Father Khatri appeared and urgently told them to hide. It was nearly dark. Monsters would come. At first, Boyd didn't believe him, but then the screams began and Boyd changed his mind. Khatri led them underground into an old dirt shelter. That's where they met Donna too. That night, the Boyd family huddled in fear, listening to the sounds of people being torn apart above. When morning came, they emerged to find the streets covered in bodies. Everyone who hadn't found shelter was dead. Boyd quickly realized there was no way out, for now. Determined to survive, he began hunting animals to provide food for the group. He felt hope, but Abby, something was wrong with her. Seeing the village brought back memories of trauma. Ellis suspected she was suffering from PTSD. He begged Boyd to stop exploring and take care of her. Boyd agreed, but promised he would return before dark. But Boyd got lost in the forest that evening, and night fell. Surrounded by monsters, Boyd stumbled and fell into a cave-like pit filled with strange talismans, the same protective charms that kept monsters away. The monsters couldn't enter. He survived the night and returned to the village the next day, talismans in hand. But by the time he made it back, tragedy had struck. Abby had snapped. Convinced everyone was stuck in a dream and that the only way to wake up was to die, she had begun shooting people. By the time Boyd arrived, Abby had already killed several villagers. This marked the most devastating moment in Boyd's life, and it was only the beginning. The people who died at Abby's hands had no real fault of their own, but the way she began killing, brutal, relentless, it became hard to tell if she was still on Boyd's side or secretly aligned with the monsters. Honestly, it felt like she was competing with them, trying to see who could spill more blood. Boyd desperately tried to reason with her, to bring her back from whatever darkness had taken over, but Abby wouldn't listen. She was just about to kill Ellis too, when Boyd had no choice left. He raised his gun and ended her life. That one moment, that one shot, changed everything. It was the very reason Ellis couldn't forgive his father. Cut to present day, Jim and Jade were brainstorming ways to power the radio again. That's when they remembered. Colony House was the largest structure in the entire town. If they could get up on the roof, they might just be able to set up an antenna. The two of them approached Donna, and after some thought, she agreed to help them. Meanwhile, Tabitha was having a heart-to-heart with Julie, who was still deeply affected by her parents' divorce. In their conversation, we finally learned the painful truth. Their son, Thomas, had died in front of them. He fell from a chair while their attention was elsewhere. Somehow, they pulled themselves together after that day, but over time, Tabitha began hallucinating, seeing Thomas and Jim. It became unbearable for both of them. That's when she decided to end the marriage. Elsewhere, Boyd visited Ellis in the hospital. He told his son he was planning to venture deep into the forest, uncertain if he'd make it back. He told Ellis he loved him, something he'd held back for too long. At first, Ellis barely responded, but after Boyd left to meet Sarah in the woods, Ellis finally came around. He hugged his father, spoke to him kindly, and deep down he began to understand. What happened to Abby wasn't Boyd's fault. Back in town, Jim had gathered the townspeople to help with the radio plan. Some were collecting wires, others digging, while Tabitha and Julie continued working in the basement. Everyone had something to do. As Boyd and Sarah headed into the woods, Sarah finally confessed everything. The voices she kept hearing? They had commanded her to kill people. First Ethan, then the rest of the town, and when she didn't obey, Nathan died in Ethan's place. She also revealed Nathan had a theory. The more they tried to escape this place, the deeper it would pull them in. Hearing this, Boyd finally understood. Sarah wasn't a threat. She was trying to help. Without another word, he unlocked her handcuffs. From that moment on, they walked side by side as allies. Meanwhile, something tragic had happened at the sheriff's station. A man named Eric had given up hope and taken his own life. The loss hit everyone hard, especially Donna. She walked away quietly to Colony House, where the team was still working on the radio tower. Fatima and Ellis were there too, hopeful that the radio might finally help them get out of the town. But in the back of Fatima's mind, there was fear. What if they did escape? Would their relationship survive the real world? They took a break and went for a drink at Tom's bar. That's where Kenny showed up to comfort her. Donna, however, had different fears. She worried that if the radio failed, the hope that kept everyone alive would be shattered. And when hope dies, people begin to give up, just like Eric did. Kenny reassured her, that won't happen. Cut back to Boyd and Sarah. They had stumbled upon a strange tree with dozens of glass bottles hanging from it. Boyd tried to remove one, but as soon as he did, Sarah collapsed, writhing in pain. When she woke up later in a makeshift tent Boyd had set up, she was terrified. The voices she heard this time? They belonged to a woman who said she once came to this place and misunderstood everything. According to her, there were things out here far worse than the monsters. Just as they were processing that, their entire tent was violently dragged across the ground by something huge. When everything went quiet, a bright white light poured over their shelter from outside. Neither of them knew what it was and neither dared to go out. Monsters still lurked just beyond the fabric. But when morning came and they stepped outside, they were stunned. The entire area was now covered in thick spider webs. When they'd arrived, this place was completely clean. Without wasting time, they moved toward the source of that strange white light from the night before. Meanwhile, back in town, Jim and Jade had a new challenge: how to power the enormous radio. That's when inspiration struck. What if they used the fake but fully functional appliances and bulbs spread across the town? Everything looked artificial, sure, but somehow it all worked. With renewed purpose, the townspeople rushed to collect as many bulbs and wires as they could. While everyone else worked, Kenny went to see Christy. He wanted to know, if they escaped, would she be willing to travel the world with him? But Christy reminded him she was already engaged to someone in the real world. That memory crushed Kenny. Quietly, he walked away. On the other side, Ellis was walking in a very different direction. He took Fatima to a quiet place outside Colony House and proposed. And Fatima, with tears in her eyes, said yes. Back in the woods, Boyd and Sarah were still heading toward the strange light. Suddenly, Boyd heard Abby's voice calling out to him. He ran toward it, and there she was, alive. At least that's what he thought. Sarah saw nothing. She tried to stop Boyd, but it was too late. He reached Abby, and she turned into something monstrous. A witch-like creature lunged at him. Boyd fell backward, and within seconds, black spiders crawled all over his body, biting him brutally. Sarah acted fast. She brushed the spiders off and helped Boyd recover. But the venom had already done its damage. Boyd was weakening, physically and mentally. His spirit was breaking. He had begun to lose all hope of ever escaping this place. Because let's face it, even in a universe where getting bitten by a spider doesn't turn you into Spider-Man, it still hurts like hell. But Sarah didn't give up on him. She stayed by his side, encouraging him, holding him steady. They still had a journey ahead, and no matter what, they had to keep moving forward. Boyd and Sarah finally reached the source of that mysterious white light, an enormous, towering lighthouse glowing in the distance. But just as they stood there staring at it, a powerful storm rolled in. Darkness was quickly approaching. Meanwhile, back in town, the radio was finally ready. Everyone was thrilled. Hope had never felt so close. But Tabitha had her mind on something else. She wanted to finish digging under the house, just 20 more minutes of work. While she continued digging, Jim and Jade powered up the radio and anxiously waited for a response. Then the storm hit town too. Time was running out. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the radio, a human voice, and it knew Jim's name. Even more chilling, it warned him that Tabitha shouldn't be digging in the basement. Hearing that, Jim was absolutely shaken. He ran out of the station and bolted home, but it was too late. Tabitha had already broken through and fallen straight into a hidden tunnel beneath the house. Down there, in the darkness, she found someone waiting for her, Victor. The white boy had told Victor this would happen, that Tabitha would come here. Victor was terrified. They needed to get out fast, because these tunnels were where the monsters slept and where they painted their horrific drawings. When Tabitha saw those drawings, she froze in horror. Victor didn't waste another second. He grabbed her and began leading her out of there. By the time Jim reached the house, it was empty. Tabitha was gone. He panicked. Cut back to the forest. Boyd was growing weaker, barely able to walk. Sarah refused to leave him behind. And just then, the white boy appeared once again. He looked right at Sarah and said, "Nathan's theory was right." Then he pointed to a nearby faraway tree. Sarah helped Boyd toward it and pushed him through the opening. Boyd vanished, teleported into a strange vertical chamber filled with stone pillars. He was trapped. He shouted for help, echoing through the hollow space. Back in town, people were still recovering from the storm and confusion, when suddenly, a massive bus rolled into the village. Everyone froze. Inside the bus were dozens of new people, confused, shocked, frightened. Their reactions? Exactly the same as every other person who had landed in this cursed town. Now the real questions begin. Will Boyd survive the chamber? What is Victor truly searching for? Who is the white boy? And will anyone ever escape this town? All these answers await in the next season. This season of the series ends here. And if you want me to break down season 3 as soon as it drops, just type next in the comments. And let me know what you loved most about this twisted, mysterious story. If you enjoyed this explanation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon on all, and give the video a big like. I'll keep bringing you more spine-chilling, emotional, and mysterious story recaps. Until then, ta-ta and goodbye.